Welcome to the deep dive. Ready to explore some marine mammal neurology with me today?
Also ready to dive into the brain, especially when it comes to these fascinating creatures.
This is going to be interesting, I think, especially because we're looking at it through this one health lens,
Yeah,
Human health, animal health, and the environment all connected.
absolutely. And we've got a great guide for this deep dive.
Yeah, the work by Giovanni de Gordo.
That's right, his piece in Pathogens, Central Nervous System Disorders of Marine Mammals, Models for Human Disease. It really makes you think.
So we're looking at neurological disorders in marine mammals and what they might tell us about human diseases.
Exactly. A lot of it focuses on cetaceans, dolphins, whales, but there's some broader connections too.
Okay, so let's jump right in. One of the things that really caught my eye was this whole idea of Alzheimer's-like disease in dolphins.
Yeah, that one's a real head scratcher, isn't it?
I mean, it sounds like something out of science fiction. Dolphins getting Alzheimer's.
Well, it's not quite that straightforward. In humans, Alzheimer's is characterized by those amyloid plaques and tau tangles in the brain. And what's fascinating is that researchers are finding similar lesions in the brains of several dolphin species.
Really? So are we talking about, like, all kinds of dolphins? Or
Yeah.
just specific ones?
Well, the paper mentions striped dolphins, bottlenose dolphins, beaked whales, white-beaked dolphins, even long-finned pilot whales. And these lesions are showing up in areas of the brain that are key for memory, learning, motor coordination. Think cerebral cortex, hippocampus, cerebellum.
Wow. So are these dolphins actually, like, experiencing Alzheimer's just like humans do?
That's the crux of the matter, isn't it? We're seeing the lesions, but are they the same? More research is needed. We need to look deeper on a genetic and molecular level to see if the processes are truly comparable to human Alzheimer's.
I see. So it's too early to say for sure, but the similarities are definitely intriguing.
Definitely intriguing.
Now, the paper also mentioned this neurotoxin, BMAA, something about a connection to those lesions.
All right. BMAA is produced by cyanobacteria, which are these microscopic organisms found in marine environments.
Oh, okay. I've heard of those. They can cause those harmful algal blooms, right?
Exactly. And this toxin can accumulate in marine food webs. Some studies have linked it to those Alzheimer's-like lesions.
So maybe the dolphins are ingesting this toxin through their food, and that's contributing to these neurological changes.
It's a possibility. And again, it really emphasizes that one health connection. What's happening in the environment can directly impact animal health and potentially human health, too.
Right. It's all connected. Okay, so we've talked about Alzheimer's-like disease in dolphins. What other neurological conditions are they looking at in this paper?
Well, there's another fascinating one, a brain-only infection caused by something called cetacean morbillivirus, or CMV.
A brain-only infection. What does that even mean?
It means the virus is found only in the brain tissue, like it's not present in other organs, which is pretty unusual.
So how does it even get into the brain in the first place? And then just stay there?
That's the million-dollar question. How does CMV cross the blood-brain barrier and persist there? There's still a lot we don't know.
Mysterious. Are there any similar conditions in humans, though? Something that might help us understand what's happening here.
There is. It's called subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, or SSPE. It's a rare and fatal brain disease, and it can actually occur years after a measles infection.
Wow. So you're saying there could be a parallel between this brain-only CMV infection in dolphins and SSPE in humans?
It's definitely possible, especially in striped dolphins. There are some striking neuropathological similarities. Both involve persistent viral infections in the brain that lead to severe damage.
That's incredible and a bit scary to think that a virus could linger in the brain for years and then cause such severe problems.
It's a reminder of how much we still don't know about these complex systems, but imagine if by understanding how this brain-only infection happens in dolphins, we could get closer to understanding, maybe even treating SSPE in humans.
Right. It could have huge implications. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we need to figure out how the CMV is even getting into the brain in the first place.
Absolutely. And there are a few theories. One is that the virus might have mutations in its genes, letting it use different receptors to get into brain cells. The paper mentions Nectin-4 and Cadi-M12 as possibilities.
Okay, so it's like the virus is finding a back door into the brain.
Exactly. Another theory is that it might be spreading directly from cell to cell within the brain.
So kind of sneaking around, avoiding the usual checkpoints.
Right. It's a bit of a detective story, trying to trace the virus's path and figure out its secrets.
And potentially unlocking some big answers along the way.
Exactly.
You know, it's fascinating, but this whole discussion of the brain-only CMV infection and its possible connection to SSPE and humans, it's a little unnerving too.
How so?
It's just a reminder that human and animal health really are connected. Diseases can jump species, and we're all part of this delicate ecosystem.
You're absolutely right. It underscores the One Health perspective.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. What else did you find interesting in this research?
Well, we can't ignore the elephant, or rather the bird, in the room.
Oh, you mean the avian flu, the AH5N1 virus.
That's the one. It's a growing concern because we're seeing it jump species and cause some pretty severe problems.
I've been hearing a lot about it in the news, especially about how it's impacting birds.
Right, it's highly pathogenic in birds. But what's worrying is its ability to cause encephalitis, inflammation of the brain, in a growing number of mammals.
Including marine mammals.
Unfortunately, yes. We've seen mass mortality events in South American sea lions connected to this virus, and there have been fatal encephalitis cases in cetaceans and even a polar bear in Alaska.
A polar bear? That's alarming.
It is, especially when you consider that species like polar bears are already struggling with habitat loss and climate change. This adds another layer of threat.
So how is this virus impacting the brain? What's the mechanism there?
It's complex, but it seems there are genetic factors in the virus itself that allow it to invade the nervous system. And of course, the host's immune response plays a role as well. There's a lot of research focused on understanding those factors, the neurotropism and neuropathogenicity of this virus.
So how are researchers even approaching a problem like this? I mean, what can they do?
They're focusing on those key factors. Why does the virus target the nervous system? And how does it actually cause damage once it's there?
It sounds like very important work with implications for both animal and human health.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've covered Alzheimer's-like disease, the CMV brain-only infection, and now avian flu. All pretty heavy stuff. What else is on the agenda for this deep dive?
Well, let's delve into the world of bacteria for a bit. Have you heard of Brucella seti?
Brucella seti? I don't think so. Is that another one that affects the brain?
It can. It's a bacterium that infects cetaceans globally, and it can lead to neurobrucellosis.
Neurobrucellosis. Okay, so definitely affecting the nervous system.
Yep. And striped dolphins seem particularly susceptible.
Interesting. So how does this Brucella seti get into the brain?
Well, there's a theory that involves, you guessed it, the prion protein.
PRPC. Again, it seems like that protein is involved in everything.
It really does, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
fascinating. In this case, it's thought that PRPC might act as a host cell receptor for Brucella seti, similar to what's been observed in mice infected with Brucella abortus.
So the bacteria might be hijacking PRPC to get into the brain cells. That's wild.
That's the idea. There's a study that looked at PRPC expression in the brains of infected striped dolphins, and they found it was present, though the intensity varied.
Okay, so it's more evidence to support this theory, but still more research to be done.
Exactly. Always more to learn.
Now, you mentioned human neurobrucellosis too. Are there any similarities between the way this disease presents in dolphins and humans?
That's what's so interesting. The neuroinflammatory patterns they're seeing in infected dolphins actually look a lot like what we see in human cases.
Wow. So studying these dolphins could give us some valuable insights into how neurobrucellosis works in humans.
That's the hope. Comparative pathology could be incredibly valuable here.
This is all so fascinating. I mean, we've only just scratched the surface, but we've already covered Alzheimer's-like disease in dolphins, a mysterious brain-only viral infection, the threat of avian flu, and now Brucella seti and neurobrucellosis.
It's a lot to take in, but it really highlights how much we can learn from studying these marine mammals. Their neurological conditions offer this unique window into understanding human health and disease.
And it really underscores the importance of the One Health concept. We're all connected. What impacts animals impacts us. What impacts the environment impacts all of us.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, there's one more thing that really struck me while reading this paper.
Oh, what's that?
It's this recurring theme of the prion protein, PRPC.
Right. It keeps popping up everywhere.
I know. It's fascinating. It seems to be playing a role in so many of these neurological disorders. Alzheimer's-like disease in dolphins, Brucella seti infection. It's this key player in this whole neurological drama unfolding in the ocean.
You're right. It's almost like this hidden connection between seemingly different conditions.
Exactly. And it really emphasizes how much we still don't know about the brain, both in humans and other animals.
So much to learn, so much to explore. Well, on that note, let's take a short break. We'll be back soon with more mind-blowing insights from the world of marine mammal neurology. And we're back. diving deeper into the fascinating world of marine mammal neurology. As we were talking about those cases, something really struck me.
Oh, what's that?
It's like we're just scratching the surface here, right? There's so much more to learn about these neurological disorders.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember what DeGuardo points out. We need to be careful about jumping to conclusions. Just because something looks like a human disease in a dolphin doesn't mean it's the exact same thing.
Right. It's tempting to draw those parallels, but these are different species with their own unique complexities.
Exactly. DeGuardo really stresses the need for more in-depth research. We need to look at the genetics, the biomolecules, the phenotypes. We need to dig deep before we can definitively say a marine mammal disorder is mirroring a human one.
So it's more about finding clues, potential pathways for research, than making those direct one-to-one correlations.
Precisely. These marine mammal cases are like pieces of a puzzle. They give us valuable information, but we need to fit them together carefully to get the full picture.
It's a reminder that science is a process. It's not about instant answers. It's about asking questions, testing, and constantly learning.
Couldn't have said it better myself. No, one thing I kept wondering about as I was reading this paper, it was the role of the environment.
Oh, interesting. Like beyond the viruses and bacteria and toxins, you mean?
Exactly. What about pollution? Habitat degradation, climate change even. Could those factors be playing a role in these neurological disorders?
That's a really good point. I mean, we know those things are already impacting marine life in so many ways.
Right. And DeGuardo does touch on this in the paper. He mentions hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, as being linked to some of these neurological changes.
And hypoxia can be caused by things like pollution, right? Or algal blooms?
Exactly. Those algal blooms can create those dead zones where oxygen levels plummet. And we already know that marine mammals are under stress from all sorts of things. Pollution, noise from ships and sonar, habitat loss.
Right. All those things are taking a toll.
Exactly. So it's not hard to imagine that all these stressors could be making them more susceptible to these neurological problems.
Like they're already dealing with so much, and then you add these pathogens and toxins on top of it.
It's a tough situation. And then you have those emerging diseases like the avian flu we were talking about earlier.
Right.
As climate change alters ecosystems and the way species interact, who knows what other diseases might jump from one species to another?
It's a scary thought, and a reminder that we need to be looking at this from a much broader perspective. We can't just focus on these neurological disorders in isolation.
Absolutely. The environmental context is crucial. It's all interconnected.
So what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as they consider all these marine mammal cases?
I think the biggest takeaway is the power of the One Health perspective. The health of humans, animals, and the environment are inextricably linked. Studying these marine mammal diseases isn't just about them, it's about us too.
It's a reminder that we're all in this together. What impacts one part of the ecosystem impacts us all.
Exactly. And I'd add that it's not just about finding cures for diseases, it's about understanding the delicate balance of these ecosystems and protecting them. Our health depends on a healthy planet.
That's a powerful message, and one that we can't ignore.
Now, going back to DeGuardo's research, he really emphasizes the need for more research into these conditions, more data, more collaboration. We need to keep digging deeper to fully understand what's going on.
So it's a call to action for the scientific community and for everyone who cares about the health of our oceans and the amazing creatures who live in them.
Precisely. These marine mammals are like sentinels. They're giving us warnings, alerting us to potential threats that could impact the whole ecosystem, including us.
A reminder of our responsibility to protect them.
Absolutely. We need to pay attention and take action. Now, as far as areas where we need more research, there are several.
Like what?
Well, for one, we need to understand the exact mechanisms by which these pathogens, whether they're viruses, bacteria, or toxins, are affecting the brains of these animals. We've talked about some theories like the role of the prion protein, but there's still so much to discover.
It's like we have a map, but large parts of it are still blank. Unexplored territory.
A great analogy. Another key area is the role of environmental factors. How are things like pollution, habitat degradation, climate change interacting with these pathogens? How are they influencing disease susceptibility?
And of course, there's the big question of how these marine mammal diseases might be connected to human health. What can we learn from them? Can we develop new treatments, preventative measures?
Those are the key questions. It's about bridging that gap between animal and human health, applying those One Health principles and translational medicine to find solutions that benefit all species.
It's about using science not just to understand the world, but to make it a better place.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And these marine mammal cases offer such a powerful example of how scientific inquiry can lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the web of life.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. We've learned so much about the complexities of these neurological conditions, the potential for comparative pathology, the importance of that One Health perspective.
And we've just scratched the surface. There's still so much more to explore.
Exactly. And speaking of exploring, our journey into marine mammal neurology continues. But before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, there's something that DeGuardo mentions that I wanted to touch on, something that I found particularly fascinating. It's this concept of differential gene expression. It sounds complicated, but I think it has huge potential for helping us understand these disorders.
You're right. Differential gene expression is a powerful tool. It can unlock so much information about these diseases.
Can you break it down for our listeners? What is differential gene expression, and why is it so important in this context?
Sure. Think of it like this. Every living thing has a set of genes, right? A blueprint that determines everything about it.
Okay.
But not all genes are active all the time. Some are switched on, some are switched off.
So it's like having a library full of books, but you only read the ones that are relevant at a particular time.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And that process of genes being turned on or off, that's called gene expression. Now, differential gene expression is what happens when we compare the patterns of gene activity between different groups or individuals.
So, for example, we could compare the gene expression in healthy dolphins to the gene expression in dolphins with a specific neurological disorder.
Precisely. And by doing that, we can see which genes are more active or less active in the diseased group. This can give us clues about the underlying mechanisms of the disease, tell us why some individuals might be more susceptible than others, and even point us towards potential targets for treatment.
It's like looking for a genetic signature of the disease, a pattern that sets it apart from a healthy state.
Exactly. And DeGuardo suggests that including these analyses of differential gene expression in postmortem studies of stranded marine mammals could give us incredible insights.
So we're not just looking at the physical symptoms anymore. We're diving down to the molecular level.
Precisely. It's about understanding the disease process at its most fundamental level.
This is all incredibly fascinating. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this part of our deep dive. And don't worry, we'll be back soon for the final part of our exploration into marine mammal neurology. Welcome back to the deep dive for the final part of our exploration into the fascinating world of marine mammal neurology. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has. And it just keeps getting more intriguing the more we dive in.
I agree. And speaking of diving in, there's one more point from DeGuardo's paper that I wanted to make sure we touched on before we wrap up. He talks about the importance of taking a really comprehensive approach to research. Like, it's not enough to just identify a pathogen or see a lesion, right? We need to understand the bigger picture.
Exactly. He argues for a multidisciplinary approach, bringing in information from all these different areas: pathology, immunology, genetics, ecology. It's about integrating all those pieces.
I like putting together a giant, complex jigsaw puzzle.
Absolutely. We need to look at the whole picture. The host's immune response, their genetics, the environmental factors, it all matters. These neurological disorders don't just happen in a vacuum.
Right, they're influenced by so many things. It's a complex web of interactions.
Exactly. And that's why DeGuardo is advocating for this more holistic approach to research, one that considers all those variables.
You know, it really highlights the importance of collaboration in science. It's not just about individual researchers working alone in their labs anymore.
Definitely. We need experts from all these different fields to come together to share their knowledge and work towards a common goal.
Breaking down those barriers, working together to solve these complex problems.
Exactly. Collaboration is key.
Well, this has been a truly thought-provoking deep dive. We've explored so much, from the mysteries of Alzheimer's-like disease in dolphins to those unusual brain-only viral infections and the emerging threat of diseases like avian flu. And we've seen how these marine mammals can act as these sentinels, warning us about potential dangers that could impact the whole ecosystem, including us.
We've seen the incredible potential of comparative pathology, how studying these animals can provide valuable insights into human health, all through that crucial One Health lens.
And through it all, it's a reminder of the urgent need for more research, more collaboration, and a greater commitment to protecting our oceans and the magnificent creatures who call them home. Their fate is our fate.
Well said. It's a responsibility we all share.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, we encourage you to stay curious, stay informed, and support the incredible work being done to protect our oceans and these amazing animals. They need our help, and ultimately, we need them.
Perfectly put.
And on that note, it's time to surface from this deep dive. Until next time, from Vet Neurojar, keep those minds inspired, hearts light, and tails wagging.